All right, we're here for another Gray Pages, and we got Joel Repick with us today. What's up, dude?
Hey guys, I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you again. I know we had
Yeah.
so
Make it sound like we're a late night show.
who
Here, really nice to be here.
last
We're
last
freaking friends like this.
Soft tunes with Joel Repick. I
uh
just have a late night show kind of voice. That's why I was invited here. It's not even true.
so last time it was just Taylor and I, and Taylor wanted to really dig into really a conversation. Actually, he wanted to, and we I think called it a line in the sand, and wanted to really get into the place of the poor in our communities and at our tables and in our lives and in the heart of God. And so, Taylor, why don't I just like you kind of took the lead of that conversation? I know you were trying to like almost interview me a little bit, but now we got the rest of the crew here. So why don't you just take the lead and I'll let you kind of frame us out and guide the way through.
Yeah, I think the question is it a line in the sand for us? And I'm kind of, I'm standing on, just to full disclosure, I think it is. I think one of the reasons that this conversation is important is because, and for anybody that's listening, this is probably going to be a 2 or 3 part conversation. As we see the prevailing model of church declining, more and more people, more and more leaders are seeing this kind of kingdom ecosystem, brave cities as a model, and that's concerning. And I would even say that we're holding out hope that that doesn't last. This isn't a model. We're just the easiest way to say it for me is we're kind of digging into something ancient, a way of life that we really think the people of God were called to. You know, if you read the book, you'll see the bookends of where the righteous prosper, the city rejoices, and fallen as Babylon, come out of her lest you take part in her sins. So the importance of understanding this way of life of building a city within your city or uncovering a city within your city. So the poor kind of auto corrects in this process because we're not talking about a better funding model. We're not talking about something cutting edge, even though we think that it can be seen as that. That's not a bad thing, but we're not simply talking about something that's like right on the innovative cusp. We're talking about when Jesus said in Matthew 28, go and make disciples, teaching them all the things that I taught, looking at his words, looking at his parables, looking at his life. He was teaching us about a kingdom coming to earth, the good news of the kingdom. He wasn't teaching us that as the zeitgeist shifts and as economy and culture and government and persecution changes, I want you to just simply adapt with new models. So there's more to the story than that. So here's where I'll kind of take us in. That's a little bit of a summary of a long conversation from last week into this thought from Proverbs. And John, I'm going to throw it to you, and then let's let the conversation go. This is in chapter 21 of Proverbs. It says, whoever shuts their ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered. So that sounds like a line in the sand to me.
You know, man, it's powerful. And I think it's right. And all these words of Jesus come to mind, like, the first thing that comes to mind is like judgment without mercy will be shown to him who has shown no mercy. You know, even we were taught to forgive, like, that our forgiveness is somehow tied up in like with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And then like you kind of come back all the way to like the cry of the poor. Um, and then that like somehow God using our own mode of being or hearing with us, like, and you know, and I mean Isaiah 58, I think we talked a little bit about, but like he says, if you spend yourself on behalf of the poor, then when you pray, I'll be like, I'm right here. And in other places, like basically Isaiah 1, if you don't, like when you pray, I'm actually not listening. That's a disturbing kind of thought. And this idea of the crying, I don't know, to me, and just riffing on a couple things that immediately calls to mind, goes all the way back to like the first crime, really, which like the Cain and Abel story. And in my mind, like he says, his blood cries to me from the ground. Like God actually hears the blood of the victim, the blood of the slain. And in some sense, I'm like, well, this is in some way it equates to like God's ears are tuned to the cry of the poor, the oppressed, the blood, the hurting, the wounds. And something about like the work that he's doing in the world is turning those wounds into a fountain of life in some sense. And so when you said in the beginning, and I just want to like, because you were saying I don't want this to be a model, my mind started racing. Like, well, what would it be if it's not a model? So I was like, well, what is a model? Like it's a method or something, like it's a form or a fashion or a style of doing something. And like, what would it be in contrast? And as I'm thinking about like God, like I use the word mode, like it's a manner or a state of being or doing, I guess would be the contrast, that there's like some ethos. So rather than just like the threatening nature of like, well, if you don't care about the poor, God doesn't care about you, but something like, I actually think it's more descriptive than prescriptive. Like this is actually maybe describing the way things actually
That's
work.
right.
Love to hear
Yeah.
what is stirring in you guys.
I'm throwing, let me just throw a couple more in.
Yep.
So I like this idea, like, are these lines in the sand to the Lord? Husbands, likewise, live with your wives in an understanding way as with a weaker vessel, since she is a woman, and grant her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Is that a line the saying is, James, when it talks about being double-minded, that man should not think that he'll receive anything from the Lord. Those all sound kind of like line in the sand stuff, like not like a psalm, like, hey, here's general truth, but potentially, yeah, God may not. Yeah.
I don't know. It's so hard to kind of draw a parallel. I'm always trying to teach my kids about relationship with God, because I mean, this is such an obvious statement, but when you understand why God said the things that he said, which granted, who does, but we're trying to, right? We're always on that pursuit. When you understand, you can approach him with such a different posture. So I was talking to my oldest son recently. He, right at the end of the summer, he was able to grab the basketball rim with both hands. And so he said, I want to dunk my 8th grade year. It was his 7th grade summer. And he was like, I want to dunk the basketball as an 8th grader. Now, why did he say that, you ask? Because he knows that his dad dunked the basketball the first semester of his 9th grade year. So his life's goal is to outdo his dad in everything that he did. So we're talking, this was this summer, and I said, hey, I know a lot about jumping and vertical and leg strength. Grabbing the rim is so far from dunking the basketball. Like you being able to grab the rim, some people are still 2.5 years from actually dunking a basketball. And I said, I want you to accomplish your goal. If you don't work on these things, calisthenics, leg strength, repetitive jumping, squats, things like that, hills, bleachers, you will not dunk your 8th grade year. These are the kinds of lines in the sand that I feel like we need to understand. And I actually applied this to him with our relationship with God the other day. Like he's not he doesn't teach us these things about the poor as a judgment against our haughty behavior. There's a cause and effect mode in this instruction from him. Like, I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you say.
Yeah.
I want to hear your voice. I want to answer you. I can't if you turn your eyes from the cries of the poor. It's not that I won't, that I'm just like, forget you, to hell with you. This is if you don't work on these things, it's not that I won't let you dunk a basketball. You can't. You won't be able to. If your life is set up in such a way that you turn your face from the pain of the oppressed, from the loneliness of the fatherless, or from the hunger of the homeless, you can't communicate with me. There's a chasm there. I have to, like, my ear is now deaf to you. Is that
There's like
good?
there's an alignment issue there. Is what's coming to my mind, that there's something about obedience that is just being where God is, right? And
being near him
and doing what he's doing, right? So I even think about Jesus sending out the disciples to heal the sick and cast out demons and, be with lepers and raise the dead. Well, that's what life in the kingdom looks like, right? Is healing and deliverance and inclusion of people on the margins and all that. But how would you ever experience that? If that's what the kingdom looks like, how would you ever experience that if you didn't get around sick people, right? If you didn't go hang out with lepers, if you didn't, right? Like, and so it's interesting. We were talking about, like, model method. It's really not model. It's probably not complex enough to be a model. But man, in any city, I don't care what its socioeconomic status is. I think, speaking of line in the sand, I think we can pretty confidently say that if you want to know what God is doing in a place, if you want to be near him in a place, go find those people, like wherever they are and wherever they hang out and whatever they're doing, right? That's where God is, right? And
so Joel, you've been doing this for 20 years. I know for a fact Hugh's been walking this path that we're talking about right now for 30 years. John and I about the same. What's your win-loss ratio?
By whose scorecard, Taylor?
I know, that's what, just take the question and make it what you want. Because is that why we're going? Is it to fix? I mean, that's such an obvious.
It is, but let me tell you,
softball in 2024. I'm more so saying, like, why, like, give a deeper why. You guys who have been in it for decades now.
Well, I mean, to be raw, like this week we had another, overdose, right? And I lost someone else. And I think I told you this, Taylor,
that you've known since he was a little kid, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so I think I've, told you my list of people like this, people I really cared about as kids, that I've either lost to, violence in the streets or overdose, or like on that last list too are people with like lifelong prison sentences. It's a kind of death. Like it's steadily climbing up, past the mid-20s, 4 people this year, right? This last one was number 4. Well, I guess it's a new year, but number 4 within
in the last 12 months. Yeah,
that's right. Anyway, and yeah, man, I mean, there's like, I've been telling people this week, like there's a trauma to that, to be honest. I mean, I haven't slept, I finally slept last night after like 3 nights of not sleeping, and just thinking about it all, like all the interactions and, just all the things you do and you don't know how to help, but you're, trying, and then it feels like a failure. And so I don't know about ratios, but I can tell you that 20 plus deaths does not feel like a win, you know, like for sure. It's like, is, is anything changing? But man, I'll share with you. I have a mentor, you've heard me talk about him a lot, who really gave like 40 or 50 years of his life, to homeless people and addiction and all this. And I was walking around the community in Pittsburgh where he gave most of his life, and he's, in his 70s, and people are still walking up to him and hugging him and crying him. You can tell, you can tell he knows this community. And this was my question to him. I was like, what has kept you in it? Like, kept coming back, kept, you know, um, like, how are you still here? And by the way, still like you still like these people, like you still want to hug them. Like
That's
you're
big.
still, yeah, it is, because, I don't got to tell you, people stay in the social service career because it's their career, but they stopped liking these people a long time ago, right? If they ever did, right? So, but I saw something in him I wanted, and I'll just give you his answer. And I think I've like clung to this is number one, he said, Joel, the quicker you can give up the thought that you're going to fix these people or fix this city, the better, like for your soul. He's like, you have to give that up. He told me this years ago. And he said it's really just your job to love, like that's it, and everything. And love is a hard thing. We'll spend our whole life figuring out what it means to love, and how to best love, especially people who are in, really hard situations. I've done things I thought were love that didn't help, right? So it's just a lifelong school in love that the poor actually give us, right? Like it's their gift to us. But secondly, he said, I really need Jesus, and this is where Jesus is.
Yeah.
He's like, it's just that simple. Like,
Mm.
I'm poor too. and being here is what reminds me of that and positions my heart to receive what Jesus is giving. And here's where he's giving it, right? So it was actually like out of his own need for the Lord, right? That he showed up, not to save anything or fix anything. And somehow, even in this, like I don't have words for it because, he just passed away a few days ago. I cared about this guy a lot. But I think that's where my reflection goes, is like, man, what part of Jesus have I experienced in this relationship? Because why would we keep going back to something, right, that can rip your heart out, again and again, except that, man, this is somehow part of Jesus, right? That's somehow what the kingdom looks like too, right? And it's changed me. Terry, you asked me when I texted you about his death, you asked me like, do you draw near to the Lord or further away? On a visceral level, it's hard for me to tell in the aftermath, right, of all the grief and stuff, but I can pretty confidently say that over the course of my life, I am near to Jesus by being near to all this heartache and failure, and like I just have no question, about that. And so maybe in the end, that's why we keep coming back. I don't know.
Okay, can I do a quick little, based on where you started, not being a formula? I don't know if you guys realize what you just threw out there is that this,
we mess everything up.
well, this literally might be a line in the sand for God, but it doesn't really ever feel like it's winning. Okay, so just hang on to that for a minute. So when we think about,
Sounds great.
well, this is like, that's like exactly like
All
the
right,
very
Sell
first
that, package
gospel.
that up and sell it.
Let's wrap it up.
You remember the first gospel presentations of the day? It's recorded. It's like, here, come hear the good news of Jesus. You gotta get a couple of your buddies to hold you down and circumcise you with a flint stone, and you can't eat bacon anymore. Hey, there's great. So you've just done that exact same thing. This is the
And
gospel.
pick up this cross.
Yeah.
That's the most terrifying picture of death of the day.
Okay, so let's go back to this not being a formula, because I think what you said, it helped me. Because I'm 57, so I'm still kind of a builder type of mentality. I think I represent the mentality of probably millions of people who would hear this and go, but what? But time out. I live in the burbs. trying to be a good guy, good dad, good husband, but I've never done anything related to the poor, you know. So what are you guys saying? I think we might be saying that specifically to the Brave City ideology, not methodology, but ideology, is we would say it's not really a brave city unless it's reflected in this life with that, right? With those in need. But it's not to fix that. It's to the way I think you said it, Joel, is that it's where we relate. Like a brave city is a community of people that are deeply trying to relate with Jesus. Like,
Right.
and we never talk about what we want to accomplish, but we do always talk about what's happening to us spiritually. Are we, and even all the scriptures that we mentioned this morning, it's really all rooted in that whole abiding passage. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, then you can ask whatever you want and it will be. It's like,
Yeah.
so I feel like if people are listening to this going, okay, I would love to do like a brave city type of a thing. And those guys are telling us, well, now we're gonna have to work with the poor. We're not suggesting that so that you'll go fix things. It's so that the people in your brave city will actually year after year go, I feel like I'm a little bit closer to the Lord. Then we're on to
Well,
something.
yeah. Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, the poor will knock that out of you pretty quickly, you wanting to fix something. Because let me tell you, who doesn't give a crap about what we're building, or our methodology, or
Ever.
you know what I mean, or our outcomes, and that's some of why I feel Jesus so much around them, right? Because it's not about that stuff. It's about, something deeper. But I was also thinking, Hugh, as you were talking, what city wants the poor except for the city of God? Like, it's the only city that wants them. And talk about a line in the sand.
Yeah.
God can't imagine his city without them. Like, that's how committed he is to them. He can't imagine them not being in the citizenry, of that place,
I mean, among us now, it wouldn't be weird, I don't think at all, to refer to the poor, the oppressed, the outcasts as the stone that the builders refuse. Like, these are the stones that Kingdom City will be built with and made of. And yet they are the last ones that we look to, but like the first place maybe that God is to be found. I would actually go so far to say I actually believe, and this is back to like the Luke 4 Jesus announcement of, I came to bring good news to the poor. Like, the good news of the kingdom is addressed to the poor. It is through the poor and the oppressed then that God moves to heal us or everyone else, I would imagine. And in some sense, like your buddy said, well, I am poor. At some level, the gift is to recognize all of us actually lack human freedom in some place and are the poor, but it is through the like explicitly concrete, materially poor that is made so plain. Or the addict or the isolated, it's like these are folks that like have been given there's like a hardness of material life and yet a real grace of presence and wisdom of God.
Right.
Tell me, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm going to let me be the sort of the yeah, but guy. So I'll put on my little churchy hat here. And I go, hey, I love the poor too. Okay. But they're not really around where I live because I live in the suburbs. So I give some money to our church and we kind of pile our resources and we help them folks over there. So what are you guys pushing me beyond, or why are you pushing me?
Yeah, that's where I was about to go too. So let me riff on that for 2 minutes and you guys kind of help piece this together. I feel like this conversation is an olive branch to the seeker that doesn't know where to go next. What this conversation fundamentally is not is a shaming or manipulative kind of proof texting of the scriptures to make you feel bad for living in the suburbs. We all have different contexts of where we live currently that could be judged based on our way of life compared to something else. So that's never the question. When I have this conversation, and the part that's always been hard for me to navigate with people is I don't want you to leave this conversation feeling like you're not doing enough. When you're sitting in your quiet space in your truck on a flight, walking around your neighborhood early in the morning, and you're wondering why I don't hear God, why I don't feel near to God, what else is there? There's this olive branch that I feel like Jesus has offered us in Matthew 25, in Luke 4, in Isaiah 58, in Proverbs 21, in Isaiah 61, of saying, if you turn your eyes to the poor, you'll find me there.
Yeah.
And this losing terminology that we're using it from a Babylonian paradigm, not a kingdom paradigm. So there's two, and I'm going to wrap up with this. This is exactly the flow I wanted to go in. There's two thoughts in that statement. One is that we don't know what kingdom wins look like. They're so different than everything that we've been taught.
And on the throne, I saw a lamb that looked as though it had been slain.
Yeah.
What? What are we even talking about? Yeah, you're
Right.
exactly right.
So first, put your church hat back on. Sir, I want I can't do that, but I want you to know, I want this brother or sister to understand the grace, the love of God, the ability to come to God in times of pain, in times of lostness or loneliness, are fully available to you. We are not the arbiters of whether or not God hears you. We feel like we're communicating slightly prophetically, probably largely bumbling around the scriptures and saying there is another level of intimacy, and we blessed are the poor in spirit. I've never felt more poor in spirit than when I'm with the poor in spirit.
Right.
And it mentors me.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea of grace and of wins is so upside down in the kingdom versus empire conversation. This is not a, sir, in the suburbs, you're not doing enough. And I'm just summarizing. So y'all jump in. Sir, in the suburbs, you're not doing enough. You need to love the poor more. It's more of, when there's that obsession of God, I want to know you more. I want to see you more. I want to hear you more. I've almost always seen that he gently grabs your face and turns it towards the margins and says, come this way. I'm over here.
So there is a legit line in the sand then, but it's not like a judgment line. It's a
Relational.
yeah, I just want to give you more. I can't give you more while you're over there.
And we're saying the line is the poor. It's not a zip code or a neighborhood, or even though these things can have socioeconomic realities, right? It's not you have to live here to really be spiritual or something, right? Like the line is this kind of person.
So put some skin on that. Like tactically, what is that?
Yeah, well, I think God, I think about this in my story. I mean, I grew up in, one of the wealthier zip codes right next to, 4 miles away, from where I live right now,
Which is the poorest zip code.
Yeah, which is the poorest, one poorest in the state. And my family was so broken. There was a drug deal that happened up the street. A teenager got killed. Now, here's the big difference, is that in some communities, there is, for a bunch of reasons, more ability to hide. But see, this is the upside down nature of the kingdom, is that things that are rich to Babylon are actually a kind of poverty in the kingdom,
Yeah.
right? That you can hide behind this stuff. Now, the fact that we can see some things in the community that I live in now with more clarity, which is actually a kind of advantage in the kingdom, right? But the fact that it can be seen more here and not there, that doesn't mean that there's there's like more brokenness in one place or the other. It has to do with like the optics, like so much of it. Now, because those optics are real, I would stand and say, man, if you like are looking for Jesus and you don't know where to find him, if he's what you want, I would beeline to the places that are visibly broken, and if that's my community and not yours, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. You know what I mean? I'm just saying it's what you said. I love that language of an olive branch. It's like, hey, you can find Jesus here. This is good news, is that you can come and discover Jesus here. And it's why so many people have come.
And the fact that even the guilt thought comes to mind is in and of itself so telling.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we were dying of thirst in the desert and I found an oasis and I told all of you, I found an oasis, we need a beeline to that oasis, none of you would say, why, you're making me feel guilty for not wanting to go to the oasis.
Right.
It's such an empire thought to think me telling you to come to the poor is shaming you.
Yeah.
No,
right.
I'm saying come to where Jesus is. You don't have to live there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be killed in a drive-by. Just come and love and like experience poverty of spirit. If you feel called to move in to incarnate, come on. But that
and the optics of it, Taylor, mean that in some communities, and I do think this, I think there is some pride to think our optics are good enough, so we think that a kind of poverty isn't there. But I don't have to tell you it's not true. It's crazy. I'm sorry, it's actually the same zip code the way it's organized, but the neighboring township. The last I heard, it actually had the highest teen drug rates. Not my community, I mean, there's a lot of drugs sold, around, but
your old community is funding your new community.
That's right. And think about the poverty behind that, right? Like, parents that are working and just giving their kids money and not involved in their lives and all that kind of stuff, and they're driving to other communities to buy drugs. And I heard some horrific stories from a government agency about stuff that was happening in that community. And the problem is it's hidden, and then we think it's not, my community, But I would still say live in whatever neighborhood God has put you in. But if you can't see the poor, if you're not in relationship with them, right, there's something that you're not seeing that God is seeing. And I think it just begins, I tell people it begins with like a simple prayer, like, God, let me see what you see,
That's it.
You look at this community. He'll bring those people across your path, like he will. They're there, they're there in every kind of community.
John looks like he's chomping at the bit.
Yeah, well, I want to throw something in here, even Hugh, like with the kind of in that role of, but like sending money, and that's great, by the way, but like the even the statement, like, well, I love the poor, and to which I would want to say, like, which one, can you tell me their name? Like, just like any of them. But I also want to broaden this a little bit, because just today, I stopped by a coffee shop and saw a buddy who said, hey, there's a girl that has been coming to our church, and she always wears like a Wellboat Bikes shirt, so you must like know her. And he starts describing her or whatever, and I realized who he was talking about, and I said, man, that's it, like, actually, so this isn't someone you would describe as poor. I mean, they're not rich, they're not well off, but they like have a house and they eat well and whatever. But as soon as he said it, something like hit me where I was like, oh, that is one of the loneliest people you've ever met. like painfully, like to where like you feel it when you interact, and you like, and it occurred to me, like even leaving, I was like, felt a little almost conviction, like, man, I should probably hit them up sometime, like I should probably like do better, because I'm aware of that. And I encourage this person, like, love them, hang out with them if you get a chance, like go out after church, grab a coffee or whatever. But the reason I'm bringing that up is to say, like, in just about every room that you walk in, this is like like to say back to like the idea of mode. In every room that you walk in, like we're using the term poor, and I think it is right to like there's some very extreme material poverty, but at the same time, like the lack of human freedom is real in every room that you go in.
That's right.
And in every room that you walk in, just thinking about, like, I don't know, when you remember like first day of school in the cafeteria, like, oh God, where the hell do I sit? And like not knowing where to go, but like to have the presence of mind and spirit to be like, God, lead me to the poor in this room, the person that's alone in this room. So like Jesus said, like when you come into a room, don't sit at the head of the table, sit at the foot of the table. And like to have a posture of going to the foot, of going to that place. And I actually
by the way,
think,
even
yep,
that though, that was always like, don't be a dick. Don't
sure.
sit. Well, what if Jesus is literally just saying, look, you should always go to that other end of the table because they're just funner down there. There's not a lot of pretense. These are like, you really want to have a good night, head on down there. Like these people are crazy. You'll have a great conversation.
Yeah, and I do think, like, even I referenced that, like the slain lamb on the throne, but I do think it's interesting, like as you were talking about the place and the gift that is among the presence of the poor, but like it's like like, okay, just taking like Christian theology, like how is that lamb slain, right? Like did I do that? Is that like, is this like a wound that I inflicted, right? So just imagine like hurting someone, just like you genuinely hurt someone you love. The hardest thing to do is to face that wound. It's like I have to look at the wound that I inflicted. And so the idea of like heaven being a place where we can look eternally at a wound that is somehow like that we have culpability in, I don't know how we can perceive that as anything but hell. Like in some real way, but yet at the same time, that becomes the source of life and grace and goodness and mercy and every good thing that we long for is like it's the thing you most need in the place you least want to look. And in that sense, I think like in the room you walk in, the thing you most need is at the place you don't want to sit. It's the place you don't want to look. You pull up to a red light, and there's a homeless man with cerebral palsy that just shaking his head on the side of the road. This is and he's a different race and culture than you. He is the other in a very significant way. You don't know him, you don't understand him, he's not like you, doesn't look like you. And all of us know the experience of like, ooh, this is difficult. Makes me uncomfortable. And yet I do think this is why the principle of hospitality is so central to the call of God. The gospel is like to open the door to the other. And why in Matthew 25, he's like, I was like, and we're like, when did we ever see you? He's like, you remember that dude on the corner that you didn't want to look at? Right. Like I was there. I was trying to connect with you. But I think like, I don't know, hopefully that's helpful to like blow the preconceived notions out a little bit, to go like in every room, there is this lower place. There is this place that you're naturally trying to avoid in the way that you've been kind of like brought up and conditioned to be strong and to stay alive and to be safe.
All right. So
time out. Can I go back to Churchville for a minute? Okay. This is, to me, this is helpful because your classic evangelical just wants to make sure some money's getting to the poor, right? But that the purpose behind that would be that we fix the problems with the poor. everything we're saying related to a brave city ideology has nothing to do with that. It has to do with incarnationally connecting with Jesus and the people that Jesus is connecting with. So the people down at that end of the table to this is where you'll find me. So if anybody ever asks us, like, why do you guys like make a line in the sand for your brave city community? It's that we want your people to experience something they're just not going to get. They could send $1 million to that orphanage over here, but they might still remain destitute spiritually their entire life. So it's an opportunity, but it has to be personal, right? Like I would say that's the line in the sand. If you don't allow all this mess to like mess up your life, you're probably going to be, yeah, I mean, I don't know how it,
That's
I
a
love
good
the
way to
line in
say
the
that.
sand
Make it,
thing,
it's like we want to make, they want to make poverty history, but we don't want to make it personal.
yeah, that's good.
But I have to amend that a little bit. Because I have to think as a father, or I'll say this, 2 days ago was my younger brother's birthday, who died 12 years ago of a drug overdose. So it was just, a shitty day. It always is. Every year, the anniversary of his death and his birthday are bad days for our family. And we all talk usually and text and whatnot. I remember talking about this exact conversation 10 years ago at a university in Birmingham. And I remember talking about my brother. This was 2 years after he had died, and saying how happy I would be, or what it would mean to me, John, if you met my brother in the street and you actually helped him. Like you ushered him out of his addiction. You ushered him out of his pain. You were able to somehow connect him with a counselor or a therapist or something that could be a pathway for him. So I think there has to be like an understanding that it's not just, and I don't think any of you are saying this, but I do want to say love manifests itself in wanting better.
Yeah.
I want you to be done with this.
Yeah.
I want you as a young female, as a few come to my mind that are in our life, to not feel like you have to give your body away constantly just to receive love. I want you as a young teenage male to not take a left into this life of potential destruction, drugs, crime, prison. Like, I want you out of this. I want you, Charlie, our dear brother who lives on the streets here, to find some way to mentally course correct and actually work a job and get a place to live. I want you, single mother on our street, to have hope. So I do want to say that. And then this is
just let me one thing throw in real quick, just to say, like, amen. And then at the same time, and also, you don't have to do what I want to be for me to love you.
That's right.
So yes. And also, like, that I'm not going anywhere.
There's just so much nuance. It's like, for those of you who want, like, I want to fix the problem. Good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a lot of text about that. There's not a lot of leadership from Jesus about fixing the problem. There's a lot of leadership about love and relationship. To want the problem to be fixed has got to be a kingdom posture. It has to be. But to just want to fix the issues that you see around you can be eerily similar to everything we see in government and empire. So it's kind of like the whole, like, philanthropy without love conversation. I want to throw that thought in here.
It's
And
actually good, honestly, because even Matthew 16, God's going to build his church. He's going to give us keys to the kingdom, and then we're going to bind things on earth and we're going to loose things. So you do grow up, if you grow up in the church, thinking that we can fix something,
Mhm.
right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess no judgment on that, but
And to me, that's what a brave city is. It's a place where everything is fixed, even if it's just for a moment. Every fatherless kid that walks into my house
for
has a
12
father,
people.
even if it's just for that night. Every single hungry person that's ever walked into my home at dinner time has a meal. And I think that that expands into an ecosystem. So the other thought I was going to say, and maybe we can come up with I'm starting to think like this idea is, it's not a line in the sand, it's a door to something.
Mm.
You gave a holy moan. So what are you thinking, Joel?
I like it. Yeah, I like it because I think what we're hitting on is like the invitation piece, right? And it puts us on a posture of seeking, right? Which probably is why love is so nuanced. Like love is so many things. As we were talking about our interactions with the poor, like I was spending time with Taylor, as you were talking, I was thinking about this. I was spending time with a young guy who's been like shadowing me, some in some of these relationships, a college student that recently moved here. And he was just asking me some questions about some relationships. And, you know, there's actually, I think this, Taylor, there's this migrant worker community in Florida that I stay pretty connected to. And one of the big reasons why is I go down there. I'm going to take this guy down there because at this point in my life, I need to remember and have spaces where I can practice just enjoying the poor, just like wanting to eat with them, wanting to be with them. At the same time, I was telling this guy, love means that I owe more to the poor than just that, right? Like I owe more to my neighborhood, than just hanging out or something, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
and part of it is because in mutuality, we really get to know each other's needs. And then, in the safety of mutuality, the poor will ask for things, right? And that's what we end up giving. You know what I mean? Like we end up giving, we started our after school program here because the community asked for it. You know what I mean? Like, and in that way, love put a demand on us, right? To start that thing, right? Because at the same time, you know, our relationships can get wrapped up in those things, right? And I want to remember how to just hang out. I want to remember how to eat, just together, right? Like, and so I think, but love is both of that, right? And if it's about seeking Jesus, this door, and I do like that language.
how'd you
Man,
say
we're searching for
not a
Jesus,
line in the
right?
sand, but a what?
Door,
Well, I want to
door in the sand. No.
it's not a line in the sand, it's a door to the, and then we need
Yeah.
to say it very poetically.
So John, that's probably a great title for this one, honestly. I don't even know how you say it, working. It's not really working with the poor, but you might call it, as a lot of people view it, the problem of the poor, not a line in the sand, but a door to,
To what?
well, that's what John's going to figure out.
Easy.
I like that. That works for me.
Well, and that, to me, that unpacks every single teaching of Jesus. He's never drawing lines in the sand because he's not saying, to hell with you. He's saying, I want you. It's like the lunchroom analogy you gave. I love that. The pressure and the anxiety of finding the cool table and then trying to keep up pretenses to be able to stay there at the cool table. I think Jesus is not saying, don't be a jerk and ignore the kids that no one likes. I think he's saying, hey dude, the loyalty and the friendship that you'll get from
Way
over
better than
here,
that.
just and sit at every table. That's kind of what I try to teach my kids. Sit at every table, connect with every group that you can, but you're going to find that there's some people in the margins that will fight for you and stand by you when everybody else
Mm.
leaves.
Mhm.
So that it's a door.
You know, I was sharing, I know when Taylor and I were talking last week, like I shared a little bit of the story of St. Francis and the way that my own life echoes this experience of like people going, you know, it's so great what you do for these poor people. And it's like, man, you don't get it. And this was like a similar thing with Francis and the lepers. Like, you don't get it at all. Like, I'm the one that gets all of the goodness out. Like, it's so much like that. I come in need, and this is such a place of grace and goodness to me. Like, they welcomed me in. They mentored me. They saved my life in a real way. And I think Francis's story told that. And actually, Hugh, as you were talking about like this, or even as we're talking about this idea of a door, what I started picturing, are you guys familiar with like iconography, like religious iconography? So like the Eastern
Of
Orthodox
course, not to the
especially will
level
have
that
this, but
you
like,
are.
Never even heard of the word.
Yeah.
well,
We
so
know
it's
what religious icons are, and we're familiar with the term ography, so we've put it together.
religious. Okay,
Right.
religious icons. That's what I mean. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, but like religious icons are, my understanding is they're not thought about just to be um like a reminder or a picture. They're a presence. They're made to be like a portal, like to the presence of the represented saint or Christ or whatever. It's like this is somehow, and I don't have like a ton of understanding, but like I just what came to mind is like the poor, that doorway as like an icon, as like in some very real way. It's like that, and even to Matthew 25, this is actually what Jesus said, like, when you did it for them, you did it for me. Like,
Right.
I equated myself. I identify fully with the poor, the oppressed, the wounds, and the blood that cries out from the ground. Like, that actually is where I've decisively planted my presence.
Hey, John, I just want to throw this in case people have like read the book or are gonna read the Brave City book.
should definitely read the
We
book.
do talk about kind of like three things that is in every ecosystem. And if you were trying to figure out, well, where do we put a target? We say, yeah, go for one of these three, and eventually all of them. One is benevolent business, right? One are just pure justice works. So like Beyond Basketball here in Alton, that's not a business. We have to raise them. So that's just a justice work or whatever it is. And then we say intentional homes or homes of intention. All three of those are key because all three of those push towards the margins. That's why those three exist. So a benevolent business, you know, our coffee shop, we don't do a lot with our money for the poor, whatever, but our place is open for them. So it's access, right? Taylor always says poverty is just lack of access. So, but you can tell the framework for those that are struggling, it's the purpose of all three of the real pillars of what a brave city is. It's not just like one of justice works isn't just the poor thing. And then we do our houses and we do businesses. No, all three of them, they put us in a position where we're going to run into actual live human beings. And it's always going to be about what Jesus is doing and who he's hanging with. So
I just had a really weird thought. I'm curious what you guys think of this. Icons aren't familiar enough. Even in my understanding of them, I'm like, this isn't familiar enough. But what is, and I know maybe not a lot of Catholics here, but you're familiar with communion. And probably you're familiar with the Catholic understanding of communion and the idea of transubstantiation, right?
Yep.
The
Got that
Catholics believe this
Yeah.
is the body. And what just occurred to me as I said that thing about icon is like that perhaps there is a very real transubstantiation in the person of in the presence of the poor. Like that actually in some real way that resonates existentially with me. Where I go,
Well, he
that
actually
sounds right.
says that actually happens. Like that's like if you invite that dude in,
I'm coming.
that's an angel unaware. Like that's an
So obviously everybody's familiar with this verse, behold, I stand at the door and knock.
I stand at your window with a cup. Just
Right. But what does he say? Do y'all know? This isn't like Bible quiz time, but it's just profound. What does he say right after that? Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Whoever opens
anyone
it
hears my voice and opens, I will come in and eat with him and
and
him
eat with
me.
him. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I think we're saying.
Mhm, mhm.
I
What's
think we're
always
saying like this is a door that Jesus has offered us. And it's a very, very significant door. Just like, what did you read? Husbands, love your wives. Something else in James.
you just stop beating her and then try to pray at the end of the night,
Yeah.
something like that.
Can we cut that part?
by the way, we don't that's too much work to edit. He'll be
Yeah. But all of it, it's not that, oh, okay, well, it's the poor thing, but this one seems to be the one that catches people. Like loving your wives, it's like, yeah, I got it for sure. I love to do that. Having faith, like not being driven and tossed by the wind, for that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. Yeah, that makes sense because I don't even know what I'm asking. God's not going to give me a stone when I ask for bread, but half the time we're asking for stones. So he doesn't give that because he's good. That makes sense. This one feels more like you better go to the poor. No, that's why I think we clarify and we really kind of hone this idea of Jesus wasn't giving us a line in the sand. He was offering a door to a meal.
All right. So not a line in the sand, but a knock at the door. And by the way, I stand at the door and knock. I just can't stop thinking about the fact, like even when you're picturing that door and you're saying a door to where, what's the door go to? Doors are so mysterious. But in that passage, you are the one on the locking side of the door.
That's right. That's right.
Like
Yep.
you're the one that has the door locked.
Yep.
He's on the outside knocking.
And will always be.
I always thought that was just about salvation, so I go to heaven. That's what I was always taught. Well, he told me this other thing.
Hey, Joel, you do have a sultry late night voice with that big mic right there. I feel like you could start a radio program.
Right.
Thursday evenings with Joel.
Thursday evenings with Joel. It's coming soon.
Joel, thanks for joining us all the way from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania.
So good.
How's the weather there?
I mean, gray.
Yeah.
It's got to always be exactly the same from
Just no sunshine.
Suckville to Suckville. We're in the upper Midwest. It's just,
Y'all have a good 3 months out of the year, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot
weather.
of there's still a lot of gray days.
you're kind of like Norway. You get 3 good months.
Yeah, or Russia.
Yeah.
kind of like that. We're just
And
tough.
then John gets 11 and a half.
Yeah.
Right.
2 bad weeks. So you all have to drive off the island.
Yeah, it's different down here. I don't know. I genuinely don't know how. I mean, bless all y'all that live other places, but I'm like, man, I don't get it. Places that freeze. I'm like, there's places that don't, right? Just don't get it.
Yeah, we're about to freeze tonight.
Someone's
Tonight
got to
we're
do it.
putting things on
My daughter the other day asked if she could turn up the heat, and I said, I said, your forefathers
So-
experienced gloom every single day of their life in this valley, and it was cold every single day, and they still produced steel. So that's what you come from. So that was my answer.
And her response?
She just stared at you. I bet she
Um,
didn't say a thing.
She just gave me a look. Then I hugged her.
So John, is this this will probably wrap up this 2-part convo?
Sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I mean, I think what we need to do is, and we can close this out, but I think what we need to do is probably follow. We've chatted a little bit around like economics on the whole. And so I think maybe we need to come back for a conversation around, but I do think like I don't know, we'll see how this feels when we kind of roll it out, but it feels like, yeah, I think that sounds right.
Right. Thanks, man.
Appreciate y'all.
Yeah,
Peace out.
good being with you guys.